Are doing transformational prayer training. This is our second session, and we are starting right on time at 7 o'clock-ish. And so I'm Chris Biang, and we are working on some review and some training. So we have like about 6 people coming in as I'm talking. So we're going to wait a little bit. And I don't know, maybe Dave, do you have jokes that you'd like to tell publicly? Okay, yeah. So anyway, there's a whole crew of people coming in. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit, and I'll do some slides. Then we have a couple videos to do, and then announcements about where things are at for next week. So why don't I go ahead and pray, and we'll get started. Is that okay? So Lord Jesus, we want to thank you tonight that we can work on our hearts, that you can help us to become men and women that are walking in faith, that are using the tough things that we feel to further us in our walk with you. And so bless us tonight as we pursue training and learning, that you'd help us all to be more fruitful in our daily walk. Amen. Okay, so last week we got started. We watched some videos, which I thought were pretty amazing, and tonight we got more to do. So this is an 8-week course. This is our second night. We have lots of reading to do. So I thought I would comment on it. How many people thought there was a lot of reading to do? So, you know, I haven't read these books before, and I thought, you know, I should probably read these because I'm doing the course. And so I'm reading this book, the first one that with the intro, which had like 1,000 pages on it with no pictures. And so I'm reading it, and all of a sudden I find out, I kind of wake up, I go, you fell asleep. And I started again, and I nodded off. And I go, wow, I think I'm being triggered. And that's a response that people have sometimes, is that if they're doing something they don't like, they fall asleep or they doze off. And it's fairly common. So I thought, okay, how does that make you feel thinking about reading the 1,000 pages or less that we had as our first assignment? And I had 2 predominant emotions. One, defeated, and the other one was overwhelmed. And because I didn't have a whole lot of time, so I thought, oh, let's do some TPM on Chris Biang here. And I got to a place where I said, how does that make me feel? And I said, I focused on the feelings, and boom, up popped Chris Biang somewhere around maybe 8th grade. And we were moving from one church to another city, and I was supposed to be confirmed in this church as a Lutheran church. And I had to rewrite the book of Matthew in my own words in about 4 days because I had put it off. And if I didn't do it, I didn't get this big party and lots of loot. And so, which was, you know, my motivation. And I felt all that stuff because I hadn't done my work well. And so the Lord spoke to my heart, and I read everything. I didn't feel any more defeat or didn't feel any more being overwhelmed. And I got it all done. So I think the exciting part about this is God uses anything to help us in our journey to walk with him better. And so now I know why in college I had such a hard time reading philosophy, because there's just endless stuff that didn't make any sense to me. And so it was just really, really a hard thing. But anyway, there's lots of reading, and it's healthy. Sometimes it's redundant, but Ed Smith built redundancy, is that the right term, into his writings, because he says we only get 15% of the information when we read. So what's good about that is if you feel like it's redundant, it is, but it's for your good that you would learn. So you could also practice a little bit during the week, and we're going to look at that. Thanks for getting the slide here. And the Transformational Prayer website has got so much stuff in it that you can spend a large part of your life reading and learning and growing. And I've been excited with the quality. I stopped after last week's video, and I just thank God for Ed Smith being willing to learn from God. It was so well done and concise. So anyway, it's a lifetime of practice, and one of the things is that we need to stick to it. Let's go to this slide here, and we're going to review some things here. This is a fun exercise slide that we're moving to. Who's running the slides? Let's go to fun exercises. There you go. All right, Genesis 4:5. Again, this is Cain and Abel, and they were having a little trouble. But for Cain and for his offering, he had no regard. So Cain became, this is God in reference here, Cain became very angry and his countenance fell. Then the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry and why has your countenance fallen? If you do well, will not your countenance be lifted up? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door and its desire is for you, but you must master it. So countenance falling is another name for being triggered. Cain was triggered about his unacceptance by God for his sacrifice, and that triggering was painful and he got angry. Anger oftentimes is a defensive emotion that we push out because we think other people caused our issue. So he got angry at his brother. But what's important here is, do we recognize when our countenance changes? So a fun exercise this week as we go on is to consider, as you're going through your day, what your countenance is like and does it fall? And so with that, here's another verse in Hebrews. But he says here, but solid food is for the mature who because of practice have their senses trained to discern good and evil. And so one of the things we want to be aware of in our lives is things change in our demeanor, which is like our countenance or our attitude. So in the East, meaning like Asia and stuff, people are concerned about losing face, that somebody would say something that would cause their countenance to change, where they would be dishonored in some way. We have some handouts down there. And so here, this next week, I'd encourage you all to pay attention to your countenance. And in doing that, get a little notebook or journal that's private to you. And in that journal, write down what happened. So maybe you're at work and the boss says something to you and it triggers you. Well, write down the event, maybe the date, and then kind of, if you can, go through the map that we have. And the map then puts you through these little boxes. So what we're trying to do is define what you believe. And it takes a while to get to that, but these are fun exercises to help make us sensitive to what's going on. So it's like when you're driving your car and you've been driving it for a long time, you can become pretty aware when there's a deviation in the engine or the tires, or in some way you are sensitive to that. That's kind of what we're looking for us. When something isn't working right, write it down, and that's a beginning for you to be careful about your future as you're following the Lord. So we want to train our senses to discern. It's interesting here that solid food is for the mature who, because of practice, have their senses trained to discern between good and evil. And I think that's kind of an interesting thing. We have to practice listening and being aware. And then try going through the map. So those are the fun exercises. We have an assignment for next week here before we watch tonight's videos. We have a Heart Ministry Facebook page. If you're not on that, maybe you could write me a note or something, or send me an email. Say, I want to get in that, because sometimes I put announcements in there, or I update us on our assignments for the next week. So that's one place you can get information. And then periodically I want to send out emails. So if you have not signed up for this class using the little tiny CCAPPXTZ address right there, or I guess it's A4PXTZ, go ahead and sign up. It's only 3 questions, but that way I get your phone number, your email, and your name, and then I can send stuff to you via email, so you don't have to kind of wonder, oh, what's our assignment next week? Chris never sends me emails. And then if you go, oh, Chris sends me too many emails, then you could put it into the spam folder, okay? So it's your choice either way. But anyway, that's a good thing to work on. And my email is right there so you can see it. The handout tonight gives you next week's assignment for reading, and then there's optional things. And I put on that paper an outline of these slides in case you want to remember what the verses are. So our first video tonight is ready to go. So are you guys ready to put it on? Good. It's your choice. Yeah. We should have popcorn to go along with this and stuff,
Okay, as a review, we're going to remember that we have three components in Transformation Prayer Ministry. We have the process, is what you do in the ministry session. We have principles, the foundational stones that support what we do in a ministry session. And then, of course, the purpose, why we do anything at all. And that God is refining our faith and renewing our minds and transforming our lives. And right now we're going to look at, in a little more detail, the process. What happens in a ministry session? First of all, there are only 7 possible locations a person can be in any given session. I've had some folks who have pushed back on that and said, well, there's got to be more than that. And I said, okay, well, what are they? And no one's come up with any more than the 7. Transformation prayer is not new. It was birthed over 20 years ago, and I also believe that's not when it was birthed. That just happens to be the time that I came up with a system. This has been here all along. This is not something that Ed created or designed, any more so than a heart surgeon designed heart surgery. No, he just learned, he discovered what was there and simply began to work in harmony with what God had already created. There's nothing new under the sun. It's just we just discover things. And we're continually discovering things. But as of right now, I can find only these 7 places that a person will be in a ministry session. And we've tested it and tested it and tested it. We've done thousands of ministry sessions, and it's consistent. Now, for me, that's good, because it gives me a sense of, okay, security. The island is only this big. I'm not going to get lost. All I have to know is, where is this person in one of these 7 boxes? If I know where they are, I know exactly what question to ask. And so that makes this process very, first of all, easy, but it also makes it teachable, and it makes it where you can evaluate what the people on your team are doing. Mm-hmm. Because I can sit down with any one of you doing a ministry session, and I can watch and tell you right up front, yes or no, you're following protocol or you're not. And I can also very easily go, and here's why you're not.
Right.
There's a reason why you got off course there. You didn't know where you were. You thought you were here, but you were actually over here, but you were asking these questions in the wrong box. That's why it didn't work. Because when you follow the protocol, it's amazing how the session just moves right along in a very, very positive way. So you have 7 possible locations, or in this case, boxes: emotion, memory, belief, truth, transformation, solutions, and anger. And there are the 5 boxes that we talk about often: emotion, memory, belief, truth, transformation, are the 5 boxes that you will flow through if you have no obstruction, no hindrance, no anger, and you simply go right to core belief. That will be the process you'll follow. Now, be honest with you, that doesn't typically happen. You typically will start with emotion, and then the person will go, I don't know, my emotion just went away. Well, see, now you've already moved over to the solution box. You resolve that, go back to belief box, truth, transformation, come back to emotion. Well, yeah, now I feel my emotion. Again, as you focus on your emotion, what comes to your mind? Nothing. No memory. Well, now we're back over in the solution box. And you work through that, come back again, and you go back to emotion box. Oh yeah, now I remember when I was 5 years old, blah, 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 blah. But you typically will bounce back and forth. And that's perfectly normal. And it's not uncommon at all to have 15 solutions that you have to deal with before you make it even get to a memory. It happens.
Right. Or even before you get to emotion.
Before you get to emotion.
You have to deal with 15 different beliefs why I'm not going to feel.
Yes.
Well, that's fine. We're still identifying lies and getting truth.
Right.
Yeah.
Somehow you've got to understand that my goal is not to get you to a memory and identify a core belief so that we can go home. That's not the goal here. The goal is that you're just moving forward, identifying lies, whether they're core belief or solution beliefs, and getting truth from the Lord. And so a successful day is you just move forward. But sometimes, as the mentoring facilitator, I feel anxious about you not going where I want you to go. And I feel my own anxiety stirring up. That's got to be attended to. You've got to get your own healing there, your own freedom there, so that you're not driving that session yourself. Your only role is simply to identify where are they, and then ask questions that apply to where they are. That is your role. You're not leading them, you're not directing them, you're not guiding them, you're not suggesting to them, you are following them. And you know what? Theoretically, if you are following a person, you are never lost, because you don't know where you're going anyway. You're just following them. You know, when I'm in the passenger seat and somebody else is driving, I'm never lost, as long as that person, I'm just riding with him. But if you're feeling lost, it's because you don't know where he is. And as you can identify, where is this person in these 7 boxes, once you know that, you know exactly what questions to ask. Let's do an overview of our 7 boxes here. The emotion box. The goal of the emotion box is to remind the person to connect to and focus upon the emotion that he or she is feeling. There's 2 objectives or intents in the emotion box. One is that they connect to what they're feeling, focus on what they're feeling, and allow for association to occur. There is never, hear me on this one, there is never any reason, any need whatsoever for you to say or suggest or to insinuate that they need to go look for a memory. That is not what you need to do.
Right.
And that's why we threw out the questions that used to be, as you're focusing on what you're feeling, you know, can you remember any time where you felt that way before? By asking that question, now you've sent them looking on a memory hunt. If they have to put any effort at all in trying to remember a memory, it means they're not wanting to remember. Association is that fast. If I say the word Christmas, see how quick that was? There came the picture, memory. If suddenly a smell came into this room of some food, whatever, you would instantly have a thought about that. That's because that's how God designed your mind to work. And it should work that way. That's how you navigate through life. And so when I focus on emotion that quick, I should remember. If I don't remember a memory, it's because there is some hesitancy and resistance in remembering. Which means, what box are you in now? We just left the emotion box and we moved over to the solution box. Now we have to figure out what is it they believe that causes them to hesitate remembering and resist remembering. What is the belief that's causing them to suppress or to block out their memory? So if they're sitting there trying to find a memory, the very fact that they're struggling to remember says they're struggling against themselves. They're pushing back against themselves. I don't want to remember. Now, they may not consciously realize that, but the fact that their association's not working says they have turned association off. It's kind of like breathing. I don't have to think about breathing. I just breathe all day long, but I can also stop breathing. And I can hold my breath. Now, I can only do it for a while before I, same thing as with blocking out emotion, blocking out memory. I can do it, I can only do it for a while, and I got to do something else to stop it from happening. But I can shut down my feelings. I can choose not to remember. I can step in between in the process and shut it down. But I'm doing that because I'm trying to solve a perceived problem, such as going to that memory will be overwhelming. Well, that's a problem. How do I fix that? Well, let me think about that. Okay, how about I just don't remember? That'll fix it. So I come up with a solution for the perceived problem.
And essentially, in this box, when you're at this stage in the process, in emotion, there's two things, especially when you're starting out, as a mentee, there's two things that you almost consciously have to do. First is don't go looking for something. I mean, the job is basically just focus on what you're feeling. What comes to your mind is you focus on what you're feeling. That's all you're doing. You're just thinking about, focusing on, connecting with emotion, and then something comes to mind, okay? So the first thing is don't go look. The second thing is don't discount. Okay, don't filter out and try to prioritize, well, that one's not really important, that has nothing to do with what we're doing. Well, don't do that either, because it came to mind for a reason, okay? And that's what we're looking for, okay? So if something comes to mind, don't just block it out or wait for a good one to pop up, right? Just use whatever comes to mind, because that's what we're looking for. And you basically only have to do that, again, like when you're first starting out, but once you get a feel for what it is you're looking for mentally, like when I'm focusing on this, that comes to mind, okay, that's what we're looking for. I don't have to go look. I also don't have to go filter anything out. Okay, so those are the two things you basically have to do on purpose when you're starting out.
There are two questions in the emotion box. How does that make you feel? Or what are you feeling right now? This question is asked in response to the content of what they share in their story. The intention of that question is to remind them to become aware of their emotion. That's the first question. How did that make you feel? In other words, that is whatever they just told you. When I come home, my wife jumps right in the middle of me. Well, how does that make you feel? Now, later on, when we go back to the emotion box, after having come through transformation, we typically reword that question a little bit and saying, and what are you feeling now? After they come out of transformation. So we do kind of reword it, but we're back in the emotion box saying, and what do you feel now?
Right.
But
You're asking the same thing. It's just asking for emotion.
What emotion are you feeling? Yes, that's the first question. Second question, as you focus upon what you are feeling, what comes to your mind? The intention of that question is to determine if there's anything that's hindering the natural process of association from occurring. Now, this is a question that I spend time with the person I'm working with. I help them to understand this question. And so at the beginning of the session, I'll say, I'm going to ask this question. Once you connect with emotion, I'm going to ask you, as you focus on that feeling, what comes to your mind? And the reason why I'm asking you this question is not to send you looking for a memory. So in this process, you never need to go looking for memory, because the memory will just come to your mind unless there's a reason you don't want to remember. And if that happens, then we're going to do the solution box. And so I'm orientating that person so that when I ask that question, they know what the question means. Now, do you see the value there in orientating that person to the questions? Now they're tracking with you, they're processing with you. It's not intended, and I say it again, it's not intended to send a person looking for a memory. Association is God's process. He designed it. It's how the mind works. And once again, that's the whole process we're doing is based upon the principles of how God designed us to function, how our minds work, what emotions do, the purpose of memory, how memory works for us. All those principles guide and direct how we do the session.
Now, I think it's also important to note that when you're at this stage in the process, in the emotion box, okay, it's never the goal to try to figure out why you feel that way. Okay, we'll save that one for later. Right. We're not ready for that one yet. Okay, all we're doing at this stage is just, are you feeling something? And if so, what comes to your mind when you focus on it? That's it. Okay, so we're not trying to sort anything out, figure anything out. It's just, okay, is there emotion in the room? Okay, look at it, and what do you think of? Basically, that's all we're doing at this point.
That's an important point, because I've had a lot of people who have said, I was in the emotion box, and I asked them, well, how does that make you feel? And they said, it makes me feel worthless and no good. And I'm thinking, well, hey, there's core belief. Let's ask Jesus for the truth. But then nothing ever happened. I said, well,
right.
Because you're in the wrong box. There's a reason why we go to memory. Memory serves a very important purpose, because that's where we learn how we came to believe what we presently believe and how we interpreted that moment. My current core belief was learned and established in that memory, not in what happened today with my wife when I came home. That's not where I learned it. And I need memory context to understand how I came to believe, or otherwise I'm assuming my wife is the reason why I feel worthless and no good. Not so. Your wife's behavior touches your lie-based belief, I'm worthless and no good. You learned a long time ago, and you're interpreting her through that belief. But you need the memory context. So if I'm in the emotion box, my story is when I come home, my wife jumps right in the middle of me, and I feel worthless and no good. I have no value. Well, see, you're in the wrong context. And so if I ask the Lord for truth there, nothing's going to happen. We've got to be in the right context in order to understand how did I come to believe that. So I'm glad you brought that up. That's an important point there. When a memory surfaces, you have entered into the memory stage in the process. If no memory comes to mind when the person is doing something, that means the person is doing something that's hampering association. And that's where you've got to do some orientation, help the person to understand that. So we drop into the memory box. The goal or the intent of the memory box is to identify the lie-based core belief. And there are 3 questions that will aid us, or designed to aid us in this process. First question, well, actually there's 3 questions. And in the memory box, you know which question to ask based upon the information the person gives you. In the emotion box, you have the first question and you have the second question, and they are always in that order. In the memory box, there is no order to your questions because your questions are based upon the information the person gives you. But I'm just going to speak the 3 questions. The first one is, how does that make you feel? The intent of that question is to assure the person is still connected to what he is feeling, to remind him to focus on his feelings. And the word that, how does that make you feel, is reflective of what they just told you. If they gave you information, I was walking home from school and 3 guys jumped on me and beat me up and took my lunch money. He didn't give me any emotion there. He just gave me memory content, information, belief. When you get that information, what you're looking for is, how did that, what you just told me, make you feel? So when they give me information, I'm asking, how did that information, what you just told me, make you feel or cause you to feel?
And essentially, it's asking how did that make you feel, or how did it make you feel when they did that, or how did it make you feel when they took your lunch money? It's all the same thing. You see how you can adjust the wording of it to match the context as long as you're asking the same question, right? So as long as you're still asking the essence of how does that, whatever it is you were just talking about, make you feel, well then it's fine. Right.
And so when they answer that question, well, it made me feel afraid. Now they brought emotion to the room. They're giving you an emotion answer. When they do that, now I'm going to ask the second question, okay? Why did you feel that way? The intent of that question is to help the person to identify what he believed that is causing him to feel what he is feeling. So, why do you feel that way? Afraid? Well, because I thought I was going to die. Well, is that emotion? No, that's more information. All right, well, how does that make you feel? See, now I'll go back to the other question. So depending on what they give me will determine what question that I ask.
Right. They're either describing what they feel or explaining why they think they feel it. Okay, it's either I feel anxious or because I believe I'm going to die. Okay, so it's either this is what I'm feeling and here's why. And so depending on which one they say, you ask the corresponding question.
Now there are times, and they're not real often, but there are times when the person will enter into a loop. I'll ask the person, and the person will tell me, I was walking home and 3 guys jumped on me and beat me up and took my lunch money. Well, how did that make you feel? Well, it made me feel afraid. Okay, well, why did you feel afraid? Well, because I was walking home and these 3 guys jumped on me and they beat me up and they took my lunch money. All right, well, then how did that make you feel? Well, it made me feel really afraid. All right, well, why did you feel afraid? Well, because I was walking home, these guys jumped on me, and we see what's happening here. Now I'm getting the same response to the 2 questions, and they're looping. Okay, now what that often means is, I don't want to go any further than we've gone. And I'm going to stay in this holding pattern right here because I'm willing to go this far, but I'm not willing to go deeper, so we'll just hang out right here for a long time.
Right, 'cause
at some point, they get frustrated with you unless they understand the process and they go, you know what, I think I'm looping right here. And so you may want to ask the looping question. Okay. But if they don't know the process, now they're thinking, why do you keep asking the same stupid question over and over again? You're frustrating me with this redundancy. Well, that's because they don't understand the process. But if they understood the process, they would just go, you know what, I think I'm kind of in a holding pattern here. Well, then we go to the looping question. The looping question is very simple. Why does believing that make you feel that? Now, you plug in the words there. Why does believing that those boys beat you up and took your lunch money make you feel afraid? Now, what we just did was we took away their two answers. Now they don't have those two answers to give. They can't say, well, when I was walking home, these, or I feel really afraid. No, I can't answer those two questions. If those two answers are gone, now I have to either go deeper or I just expose to you, I'm operating on a solution here. And so we may move over to those solution boxes. Do you feel any hesitation or resistance to the thought of answering the question differently there, or going deeper, remembering something else? Yeah, I guess I do. But the looping question breaks them out of the loop, takes away their two answers, and requires them to either go deeper or expose the fact that they are actually engaged in a solution.
And you notice that in the example that he gave, the belief statement, the memory of being jumped and lunch money being taken, that wasn't the reason for why he was feeling what he was feeling. It's what happened, but it's not why he's feeling what he's feeling. Because if that were true, you can't fix it, right? This isn't the belief that's causing the pain. And so we were going back and forth, but not moving.
Right.
Okay. Now, it's one thing if you're going back and forth from, I'm going to die, I feel scared. I'm going to die, I feel scared. Well, that's a belief that would produce that emotion, right? And so at that point, you're ready to move on to the next box. But if you're looping with a belief statement that wouldn't fall in the category of core belief, so a statement of who I am or my condition, state of being or self-identity, well, then that's when you pull this question out. Say, okay, well, but why does that make you feel afraid, essentially? Okay, why does the fact that they jumped you and took your money make you feel afraid? Well, it's because I felt out of control. I felt unprotected. I felt like no one was going to rescue me. Something bad was going to happen. We see how those type of beliefs, they would produce the emotion that we're looking for, or they would produce the emotion that we're dealing with. Okay. And so at that point, now, essentially, you're looping with core belief. So you're ready to move on to the next one.
Right. So there's good looping and there's not good looping. The bad looping is when I'm in a holding pattern that is not core belief. These three guys jump me and I feel afraid. These three guys jump me and I feel afraid. These three guys jump me, I feel afraid. That is just a holding pattern. Okay, so then why does believing them jumping you make you feel afraid? Then he drops down, because I thought I was going to die. Well, how does that make you feel? Like hopeless, out of control. All right, so, and why do you feel that way? Because I believed I was going to die. Well, how does that make you feel? Well, hopeless and out of control. Well, now we're looping again, but we're looping at core belief, right. State of being. Now we're ready to move to the belief box. And so you want looping to occur when core belief has come into the room. Looping that's occurring that's not core belief means they don't want to move forward. Do you see the distinction there? So there is a good time to loop and there's a time when you don't want to loop. And the good time is when it's core belief, such as I'm worthless and I'm no good. Well, how does that make you feel? It makes you feel like I'm worthless and no good. And why do you feel that way? Because I'm worthless and I'm no good. Well, how does that make you feel? It makes me feel like I'm worthless and I'm no good. Okay, we're looping in a good place. Now we got core belief. Okay, now we're ready to move to the belief box.
And you see how in that example, I got mugged and I feel afraid. Well, let's say by mistake, we move on to the next step in the process with that as the belief. Well, does it feel true that you were mugged and they took your lunch money? Well, yeah. But what truth would we expect to receive at that point? He doesn't need any. That's what happened, right? And so what truth would somehow make that feel okay? There would be no transformation because that's kind of what happened. You got mugged and you didn't eat lunch that day. Okay? So that's not why you're feeling what you're feeling. So we hadn't quite gotten there yet. And so we're going to ask the looping question, why does that cause you to feel afraid? Well, because I felt unprotected. Oh, okay. Well, does it feel true that you're unprotected? Yeah, it does. Okay, Lord, what do you want him to know? Oh, no, he had me. I didn't die. In fact, I got a better lunch because of the sympathy I got at school. right? Or whatever. Okay, but you see how that's the belief that we want to take forward, not the stuff, well, I was mugged, I feel afraid. Okay, we need to move past that so that we can get to the actual belief that's producing the pain.
The goal of the belief box is to determine if the lie that has been identified indeed feels true to the person. It's not to identify, is it true? It's to identify, does it feel true or seem true to the person? There's only one question in the belief box. Not is it true, but does it feel true that whatever the belief that has been identified. Not is it true, but does it feel true that you're out of control, you're going to die? Not is it true, but does it feel true that you're worthless and that you're a defect, whatever their belief was.
And essentially what we're doing here is trying to identify if the belief that we've just identified is the one that they believe. Okay, so if I believe it, it will feel true. If I don't believe it, it won't feel true. And so we're using that feel true part to determine whether I believe it to be true. Okay, because we're wanting to take a lie that I believe to the Lord so that I can get truth. Okay, there's no point in going to the Lord for truth about beliefs that I don't actually believe, right? So if we get to here and does it feel true that you're worthless? No, not really. Well, that tells me that we hadn't quite identified the belief that was producing the pain. Because maybe it wasn't that I was worthless, maybe it was that I'm unlovable. And we just hadn't gotten there yet, so we ask a few more questions. Well, does it feel true that you're unlovable? Yeah, no, that one feels true. You see how that works? Because that's what we're looking for. This is sort of the metal detector to make sure that we're there. Okay.
So then the intent of that question or that box is to have the person acknowledge and confirm that the belief identified feels true to him. And we're emphasizing key words in that question. When you state the question, it's important that you stress and emphasize the phrase, not is it true, but does it feel true that? Or not that it's true, but does it feel true? Because we want to draw the distinction there. We recognize that it's not true. And what a person will tend to do when you ask this question, if you don't ask it with the emphasis, is that they will tell you the right answer. Right. Does it feel true that you're worthless and no good? Well, no, the Bible clearly says that I have great value with God and I have worth with Him, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I know that too. Now let's start all over again. Not is it true. We acknowledge the truth here, but what feels true here? Well, it does feel true that I'm worthless and no good. But I know that's not true. I know, and I agree with you on that. But does it feel true? Yes, it feels true. I'm worthless and no good. Okay, now where we need to be. Because we're going to come back to that and say, does it still feel true? And he's going to look at that and go, no, that doesn't feel true now. Or he's going to go, yeah, it still feels true, and which means we've missed something.
And essentially what's meant by the does it feel true? Because that sometimes needs some explanation as well. Even though it's pretty straightforward once you get it, but until you get it, you may need to keep explaining it. And so another way that I'll explain it is, instead of saying, does it feel true, but does it seem true? I understand that it's not true, but is that what appears to be true? Like, even though, yes, I know that I'm loved by God, but does it seem that way? Does it appear that way? Does that feel true? Because even though I believe that God loves me, but if I don't feel that He does, if it doesn't seem like He does, if it doesn't appear that He does, well, then that tells us something very important about what I actually believe. Okay, so that's what we're looking for. What feels true? What seems true? What appears to be true when you think about that? Well, I'm worthless. Oh, okay, well, that's what we're looking for. Even though, obviously, yes, you know that you're not, but if it feels true, then that's what we're looking for. If I ever get to a point where, some point of Scripture or something doesn't 100% feel, seem, appear to be true, then at the very least it tells me that I at least have some room to grow in my experiential, belief in it. Okay, so it's not necessarily that I just absolutely do not believe it at all, but maybe there's some room that I could believe it a little more, right?
Right.
Just to kind of bring a little bit of little mercy, a wiggle room in there. So it's not that we all just totally believe lies. Of course we believe some truth, right? That's why we want more, because we've tasted it, we've seen it. We want to know that more, okay? And so I want to believe it, so that tells me I do in a little bit, but there's a little bit over here where I don't yet believe it. That's essentially what we'll talk about in much later training. That's essentially what doubt is anyway. It's just evidence that I believe something that's contrary to what the truth that I really want to believe. Okay, I want to believe that He loves me, but it doesn't always feel true. Well, that tells me right here, there's some doubt. There's a belief that's contrary to the truth of God loves me. Yeah. There's something over here where, He loves me, but at the same time, I'm unlovable. Okay, well, let's deal with that, because Because then I have pure faith, I have pure belief, and now I experientially know that, and so that truth that he loves me feels true. It appears to be true. It is true. Okay? That's what we want.
So when we're in the belief box, the primary intent is twofold. One is that we're affirming or establishing this is what you believe. And then secondly, we're establishing what we call a baseline that we will return to when we get into the transformation box. It is important to write down the person's belief statement so that you can repeat it verbatim when you later test for transformation when in the transformation box. Only use the person's exact wording. Do not use alternate expressions, synonyms, or your own interpretation. Now, all I mean by that is when I get over the transformation box and I go back to the baseline and say, okay, does it still feel true? I want to say exactly their words, that you're worthless and no good. I don't want to say that you don't have any real value, because that may not be their belief, because words mean things, and their words mean things to them. And so if I change their wording, then the transformation may not be valid. I mean, if I go, if their lie was I'm worthless and no good, and I come back and say, does it still feel true that you don't have value? They may go, well, I don't know. I hadn't thought of it that way before. See, I've put them onto another track. I want to say exactly, does it still feel true, verbatim, that you're worthless and no good? Now they have exactly the same words, and those words mean something to them, and they can say, you know what? That doesn't feel true anymore. That feels like a lie. That feels silly. And so it's important that you use their words verbatim.
Because that's the only way to have a reliable test when we get to that point, right?
Once a lie-based core belief has been identified and a baseline has been established, you're ready to move into the next step in the process, into the truth box. The goal of the truth box is to remind the person where he is in the session. It's time to hear from the Lord, and to offer the lie up to the Lord for his perspective. And there are two questions in the truth box. One you will use initially with new people. At some point you don't have to use it anymore because they'll just know where we are. But initially we ask them, may we offer this belief up to the Lord, just to kind of alert them to where we are in the process. And then very straightforward and simple, Lord, what do you want Jim to know? Don't add to that. Don't pray a long, lengthy prayer. If you do, you provide them a way of escape. They can suppress their emotions and run off and do something else. So you just want to make it quick. Once you say, does it feel true? Not is it true, but does it feel true that you're worthless and no good? Yeah, that feels really true. Okay, can we offer that up to the Lord? Yes, yes, we can. Jesus, what do you want Jim to know about that? That's how much time you spend there. You get right past it. Now Jim is now dealing with this belief with the Lord in a position to receive truth.
And just kind of as a side note, you see how asking the question in this box, may we present that belief to the Lord, how it basically becomes unnecessary. Like, you don't need to ever ask that question with me, because I know the process. Like, I know once I've identified a lie, I know where we're headed, right? So you don't need to ask that question, but you see how that's true for all of them. You only need to ask the question if I don't yet know what I'm supposed to be doing at this point, okay? And so that's where it is helpful to ask the questions, and all of them, until they get their sea legs and they understand what they're doing in the process. It's like the example that he gave earlier, where essentially the session, when you're working with somebody who knows, the session basically looks like me sitting there and listening to them do the whole thing, basically. And I only ever interject when I see that they missed something. They're off track, or they don't realize that that's a solution, or whatever. And that's when I interject, but not for the purpose of fixing them, but for showing them something that they didn't quite really see. They didn't realize, oh yeah, I guess so, that is kind of a solution, because when I think about it, there's resistance and hesitancy to not do it. Okay, that makes sense. And so I'm equipping them, they're learning. And so now, next time when that happens, I'm not going to be necessary again, right? Because they'll know. And so that's the purpose from the very beginning, is ask the question to remind them of what they should know, or what they should be learning about the process, about the principles, about the purpose. Okay, so this is just one of the more obvious ones where maybe present that belief to the Lord. It becomes pretty redundant, even after the first session, because they get it, right? Because I'm not asking permission, right? I'm just basically reminding them, this is where we are in the process, and this is, when I ask my next question, I'm not actually referring to you, okay? Lord, what do you want Jim to know? Okay, because if he doesn't understand that may throw him off, right? Because if I'm a mentee and I don't understand the purpose of this box and the purpose of these questions and how the process works, It may be that I'm sitting here, and when you ask, Lord, what do you want Josh to know? If I don't know what I'm doing, again, I may sit and wait for you to tell me what he said. Or I may sit and wait and expect to hear something. Or it's like, okay, am I supposed to go get my Bible out and find out? Or you see how that works. Okay, so the purpose of the question is to remind them of what they should be learning about the process.
Mm-hmm. Something really important right here is that you as the facilitator do not need to know what God just did. You don't need to know whether Jesus said something or didn't say something. You don't need to say, okay, so what did Jesus say something? Did he do something here? You don't need that information. It won't help you. It doesn't move the process forward. Now, if they just start telling you things, that's fine. That's because it's their session. But you should not ask, okay, just report whatever you see since they're here. Now you're going, but Ed, that's what you taught us in the earlier years. You're right. So don't do it anymore, because I'm saying you don't need to. Because I learned that that's unnecessary, and it really just slows the process down. Just listen, watch what's happening, but know that nothing that you're seeing is going to have anything to do with what you're going to do next.
Well, and not only that, it's kind of an even deeper issue as well, the reason for not doing that. Because if you ask, okay, well, what did Jesus say, or what did you hear from the Lord, or whatever, do you see the underlying presumption that you're making at that point? They just heard from the Lord.
Right.
But do you know that?
Yeah.
You don't have a clue, and neither do they. The only way to check is here. We're looking for evidence. We're looking for, was there a change in belief?
Right.
Because let's say I get here and I hear the truth.
Right.
I hear I have value, I'm loved by God, I am important, I see him coming up, the heavens broke open and he's coming down and he's giving me hugs. Does that mean that I've heard from the Lord?
Just because the person reports he's heard from the Lord does not mean that he heard from the Lord. And just because the person says nothing happened doesn't mean something happened, didn't happen.
Right.
You don't know. The only test for transformation that you have is, does the lie still feel true? Not did the angels sing, not did you see a heavenly light, not did Jesus come over and hug you, but does the lie still feel true? People's imaginations can create all manner of things, but no one can make a lie you believe feel anything but a lie. The Holy Spirit can cause the lie to feel false and the truth feel true. Only he can do that. But we can create all kinds of pictures and happy things, and we can suppress our emotions, and we can praise and worship God right there and try to get ourselves to feel better, but we can't make the lie go away. Only the Lord can renew our minds. So you only have one test. And so right there's no reason to go in and try to ask a bunch of questions. What did Jesus do? Or can you tell me what happened there? That's not necessary. It won't help you.
And especially if somebody's just starting out and they're learning this process to begin with, if you're asking what the Lord said, well, what if they didn't see anything, hear anything, sense anything, feel anything? What if they didn't see a change? Well, does that mean that nothing happened? Well, no. We have no idea. Right. It could have been that he just got some real big truth that's going to impact the rest of his life, but he just hasn't checked for that yet. We don't know. I mean, if you're working with Dad, that's basically what you're going to get. If you were to ask, okay, well, what did the Lord say? Oh, I didn't hear anything.
Right.
Okay, well, does that mean that he didn't receive truth? Well, no. We have no idea.
Right.
Let's check for evidence.
Right.
Let's check to see if there's been a shift in thinking. Let's see if there's been a mind renewal, change of thought.
Yeah. Okay. All of my sessions, I say all, I could count on one hand that weren't this way. Over 20 years of receiving ministry myself, through the years, doing sessions with myself and people praying with me, 99% of the time, I don't see anything, I don't hear anything, nothing changes in my thought process other than a subtle shift inside that takes place. And then when I go back to the lie and go, does that still feel true? I go, no, that changed. Now that's my sessions. I don't get to see pictures. I've never had Jesus come over and hug me, and I've never seen angels. I don't see things. I don't hear things. But I get mind renewal. Because I just need the Lord to bring truth into my lie and renew my mind in truth. The fanfare I don't get. And that's probably good, because for whatever reason he put me out in front of this thing. And if my testimony to you was, you know, when I have sessions, angels show up and Jesus comes over and hugs me, and you're right out there going like, well, I never get that. So I guess the model here is going, I never hear anything, I don't ever see anything. And like he said, he prayed with me even last night in the motel room because he got me all triggered and stirred up. But as he was praying with me there, it's his fault. As he's praying with me,
still working on some solutions. Yeah.
as he's praying with me. And you know what, folks, isn't that glorious that the Son can pray with his Father and the Father can pray with the Son? That's evidence this ministry is incredible. But anyways, he's praying with me last night. I didn't hear anything. I didn't see anything. And after a while, he said, okay, well, Dad, what's going on? I said, I really don't know, son. I said, but I think that doesn't feel true anymore. I sense it's very subtle for me. And that's what my sessions look like. But you know what? I know my life is transforming. I know I'm not the man I was 20 years ago. And I know I got on a fast track 20 years ago that I was able to intentionally and purposely cooperate with God with what he's doing in my life. For the first time, before, I'm fighting God. Something would happen, I blamed everybody else, I'm running from it, I'm suppressing emotion, and I'm fighting God. 20 years ago, there was a major paradigm shift for me. Now I can cooperate with him intentionally and purposefully. I can do that. And all the point is simply, we don't need to know what happened right there. It's irrelevant, and whether they say something happened or they say nothing happened is irrelevant. The only thing you have is that question, does a lie still feel true? And when they look at that, and they'll know. And they'll say either yes or they'll say no. If they say yes, that's your test. Now, if by chance you're in the truth box, you've asked the Lord for truth, and you're sitting there and you're watching the person, and you'll have these kind of people, it's like they just freeze and never move. You can't even see them breathing. You see no noticeable sign of life. I mean, they're just sitting there. And you're going, okay, well, how long do I wait before I ask the transformation question? Because, there's no indication that, I'm telling you, it's like, okay, did you just freeze or what? Because there's a statue, no sign of anything. Well, what I will do is just give it some time. How long? I'll wait a while. And then I'll ask a question that we haven't shared with you yet. We call it the lost question. It simply is this question. We get your little red sign to hold up?
Well, it's for right now, we put it in the anger box. That's not where it lives. But that's where we stored it for the production.
Well, this is just our lost question.
Lost as in if you don't know where you are in the process.
Right. You just don't really know what's happening. And so this question serves us well when the person's just sitting there and there's no sign of indication that something's happening. Because usually you can watch them and they'll kind of go through some kind of emotion or something, and then maybe there'll be a sigh of relief, and they'll be like, and you'll see they're like, okay, all right. And you can say, okay, does it still feel true? But you have those guys that just give you no clue whatsoever. So I give them a few moments, and then I will ask them a lost question. Jim, what's going on? That's the question. But that question will rescue you from any time that you're lost. You go, hey, Jim, what's going on? I don't know, my emotions just went away. Now you know where you are. Hey, Jim, what's going on? Well, I feel this. Okay, you know where you are. So that question reposition you on the map to tell you where you are.
No matter how they respond to this one, that'll give you ample information to figure out where you are in the process.
Exactly. And so if we're in the truth box, Jesus, what do you want Jim to know? And nothing's happening that you can see. You wait for a while, finally, Jim, what's going on? Well, now he can give you a clue. He can say, well, the Lord just blah, 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 blah. Or he might say, you know what, nothing at all. Now, it doesn't matter what he's told you, but now you can ask the transformation question. Okay, so does it still feel true that you're worthless and no good? There's where you are. But it's just this question will help you to know when to ask the question. That's what the purpose of it at that stage.
We'll talk about that one more in depth later on.
The only way to know what has happened or not with certainty is in the transformation box. Until transformation has been tested with the transformation question, there is no way of knowing what has happened. And this is the next stage in our process, transformation box. Well, what is transformation? The goal of the transformation box is to test to determine if transformation of the belief has occurred. Transformation follows the transition from experientially believing a lie to experientially knowing the truth. Transformation is the predictable and expected outcome of an experiential mind renewal. Like Paul said, be transformed, how? By the renewing of your mind. Now, for many years of my Christian life, I thought mind renewal was basically getting biblically smarter, learning what the Bible said, gaining knowledge. And then it dawned on me one day, any lost person could do this, and there's no guarantee they'll be transformed. Transformation is heart belief, not head knowledge. I love the passage where Paul says, that you may know the love of God that supersedes, goes beyond knowledge, or the peace of Christ that this surpasses comprehension. See, there's another realm that God wants to move us to. Yeah, he wants us to study the Scripture. Yes, he wants us to memorize the Bible. Yes, he wants us to do all those things that a lost person could do, because that provides him with that which to work with. But he wants us to move beyond knowledge. Because knowledge alone, what does it do? Paul says, and we use the King James, it puffeth up. It makes you arrogant. It causes you to be judgmental. It causes you to look down on people. Knowledge alone won't accomplish it. You got to move past that into the realm of transformation. There's only one question in the transformation box. Does it still feel true that whatever their belief is? Does it still feel true that you're worthless and no good? Does it still feel true that you're trapped and that you're going to die? We feel whatever we believe, so if we believe a lie, it will feel true. Likewise, if we believe the truth, it will feel true, and the lie will not feel true. So then if the lie no longer feels true, then the lie is no longer believed. Thus, the Holy Spirit has illuminated the truth in the person's mind.
At that point, we know, I've heard from the Holy Spirit, but not before.
Right.
Okay.
The test for transformation is not based upon what you think you see happening, the absence of emotional pain, or even that the person reporting that he has heard from the Lord. The test is simply, does the lie still feel true? Peace is not a test for transformation. Peace will follow truth, but the absence of pain is not a sure indication of whether transformation has occurred or not. Absence of pain may be the presence of suppression. So we no longer use the feeling test to see if something happened. The feeling test is simply to indicate, are there other lies still present? Not did the person receive truth from the Holy Spirit. The only test for did the person receive truth is, does the lie still feel true? The presence of peace may indicate the person received truth, but the absence of peace may simply mean there are additional lies still present. But it doesn't mean he hadn't received truth over here. Because I can receive truth, okay, it no longer feels true that I'm worthless and no good. Well, so now what do you feel? I still feel horrible. Mm-hmm. Well, now you're going, well, maybe it didn't work. Oh, it worked. The lie doesn't feel true. I just still feel horrible. Why does it still feel horrible? Because there are additional lies that are still triggered, still producing emotion. It has nothing to do with transformation. It has to do with something still there. Emotion indicates something still there.
And not to take anything away from it, but let's say I ask the question, does it still feel true that you're worthless? They say no. Okay, I check the clock, which we haven't really talked about yet. Check the clock. I've got half an hour left. So, okay, well, what are you feeling now? I'm asking for emotion. I'm not asking to see if something happened. I'm not asking to see if there's been transformation. I'm looking for more beliefs. And we do that by looking for the smoke that they produce, right? So looking for emotion. So if I ask, how are you feeling right now? And they say, you know what, I just feel totally peaceful and calm. Well, that doesn't mean they're somehow done. That doesn't mean that they now believe all truth and no longer believe lies. It's just that, in essence, they're just not triggered right now. Okay? So it's not that somehow you've reached a finish line. It's just, no, you have a little window where you get to breathe and you're not triggered. Okay? So this isn't the test for transformation. We're not asking about emotion to see if something happened or see if we have more work to be done, because guess what? You do. And you always will until you die or he shows up. But that's okay. Emotion serves a very important purpose in the process, is to help me identify what I believe. But it is not a good indication whether I'm done or not. Okay?
So no matter what answer they give you in the transformation box, doesn't matter when you ask the question, no matter what answer they give you, you look at the clock, do I have time to do another whole session? If I do, I immediately then move back to the emotion box and I ask, okay, so what are you feeling now? And you begin the process again.
And we'll just illustrate that real quick. So let's say we've gone through the process, asked the Lord for truth, and now I'm sitting here and I'm ready to ask the question. I give him a minute or two. Okay, does it still feel true that you're worthless? They say no. I check the clock. We have time. I go ask this question, looking for more beliefs, basically, that'll produce emotion. Rewind it. Let's say, instead I ask, does it still feel true that you're worthless? And they say, it does. Okay, I check the clock. I've got time. I now ask about emotion, because I obviously know we still have a belief there that we can get to. So now I'm going to ask about emotion. Well, what are you feeling now? But it's not to see if something happened. Either way, this is where I'm headed. Okay?
No.
It's either to follow the emotion and let's find it, because it could have been the reason why I didn't hear anything is because I hadn't quite identified what it was.
Right.
Okay, so how do you identify it? You start over there and you look.
Right.
Or it could be, let's say, I'm not hearing, because we'll learn later, anger can sometimes get in the way. Because if I'm angry, it's hard to hear. I mean, if I'm angry at you, you can tell me something, but it's not coming through, right? So it could be that anger's getting in the way. Well, how will we know? Let's ask how they're feeling right now. If they say anger, well, I know where I am. Okay, now I'm over in the anger box. But either way, this is where I go straight out of the transformation box. Granted, I have time. Or let's say instead of anger, we have a different solution. Let's say, does it still feel true that you're worthless? It does. Okay, I've got time, so what are you feeling now? Well, nothing. Nothing. Where does that put us? Over in the solution box. Because the fact that they said it does still feel true that they're worthless tells us that they believe that they're worthless. And if you believe that you're worthless, does that feel good or does that feel bad? That feels bad. And so if I'm not feeling that, it tells me I've got a solution at play. Well, you see, that could have interfered with me receiving truth. But how would you have known if you didn't first go over here? So no matter what happens over here, if you have time, you start right back over here. And this will tell you basically where to go next.
Okay, and also in that emotion box, after you ask them, okay, so what are you feeling now? Well, I feel worthless. The next question is,
What comes
as you
to your mind as you
focus
focus?
on
Yeah.
feeling worthless, what comes to your mind? Because they may then go to a different memory. And that may be the reason why we didn't get where we needed to get. We weren't in the right place yet.
Right.
And so that may take you to a different memory.
Right, and the new, the second memory that we'll go to here in a second, like in that situation, would actually give a more accurate understanding as to why I believe that I'm worthless in the first place.
Right.
Okay, where the first one may not have. Maybe it was just, whatever it was, but it didn't clearly explain why I believe that I'm worthless. It wasn't a good depiction of how I came to believe that.
Right.
Okay, and so it's not until I go through it again, hit it again, now this one comes to mind. Okay, that's why I believe that I'm worthless. Yeah, that feels true. Lord, what do you want me to know? Does it still feel true? No, it doesn't. But you see how that works.
We're going to then deal with these two boxes individually and unpack them because there's much in there that we want to look at in detail, and that'll be in a different session.
In the next week or two, we are going to try to split up and do some little practice groups. So if I could ask you to email to Dan, can we use you? Sure. Who you would be comfortable meeting with. It has to be the same gender. And we can have up to maybe 4 people in a little group. And then also with who you would like to be with, and then who you might not want to be with. So I would imagine that if your last name is the same as everybody else in this church, you would probably want to split up because some of your stuff might be something in common. So just a side note on that we will then work on it and see, because we want you to be comfortable so that you can be open, and we want you to be confident that the people there are going to respect you, and that grace is going to be a big part of this thing. So part of that is a real important feature. So please email Dan. If you're a Madison person, you can email me. And I've already got an idea of some of the breakdowns of who should be with who. Like if you're married, you probably shouldn't be with your mate because that just complicates things. So anyway, that'll be coming up in the next 2 weeks. You should have your homework assignment in the handout, and then we'll also be emailing that out. So next week we'll be here at 7 o'clock again. This is not scolding. This is helping people to feel comfortable that are waiting on the internet for people to arrive, because it's hard to start and then not have half the people show up on time. So if you guys could be here at 7, and all those people that are watching me up here doing tap dance and stuff waiting for you to show up, it's just hard on them. So why don't we close in prayer, and then, well, no, let's not. Does anyone have questions or observations from the last week? Or fun little things they did? Nobody had fun last week. Okay. No questions? Everybody's got this figured out. Why are we even doing this training if everybody's got it figured out? So we'll keep working at it. Do you have observations, Dan?
Very, very appreciative that you're coming up down here, and that's an excellent teaching for the church. I appreciate it.
Good. I appreciate those that have helped me. Plus, I like hanging out down here. Did I tell you about the steak dinners your dad was offering?
Chris, did you tell the Madison crew that we're having a cookout for them after church this Sunday?
I think I alluded to that to a few people, but next Sunday, Mike and I are going to be out of town at a family reunion, and the Foundation Church has graciously allowed the Madison Church to come down here and liberate a fine potluck dinner from the basement. Also, if you're from Madison and you want to bring some food along with you, is it porterhouse or sirloin? Yeah. Okay. Whatever. They're not fussy, but that'll be right after the service on Sunday.
The church starts at 9:30 in the morning, and if you have a lawn chair and it's nice out, we can sit outside. We're going to be grilling hot dogs, brats, hamburgers. It's going to be great.
And you're going to be teaching here, and they can still sit outside?
Yeah.
Okay. This is a full service church. That's great. All right. Why don't we close in prayer? Lord, we want to thank you for what you're doing in our lives. We want to thank you for, even with all the hardships in our world, that this wisdom that you're giving us is so wonderful, and it changes lives, it changes families, changes society. And we want to be men and women that are walking in faith with the fruit of the Spirit. Amen. Okay. Thank you.